Like cultural organizations nationwide, Markham Arts Council has been celebrating Culture Days featuring Markham artists and arts professionals. Today, I'm excited to introduce D Paul Schafer, an educator, advisor, administrator, and researcher in the cultural field for more than 5 decades and a resident of Markham. Paul is an accomplished author, and his most recent book, The Arts, Gateway to a Fulfilling Life and Cultural Age, speaks volumes about culture and its importance in our region, province, country, and the world. Welcome, Paul. It is great to have you here today.
Thank you much, Caroline. It's a real privilege for me to be here with you today. And I'm going to be talking about a book that I've just had published recently, and I'll hold it up here. The title of the book, the title is The Arts, Gateway to a Fulfilling Life and Cultural Age. It's just been published by Rock Mills Press in Ontario. And the book itself is dedicated to artists and arts organizations for all the beauty, happiness, creativity, and spirituality they bring into the world. The book is really broken into 2 parts. The first part, which covers about 7 or 8 chapters, is how the arts can help us to live a fulfilling life. And the second part of about 7 or 8 chapters is related to how the arts can be successful as a gateway to leading us into a cultural age. So we'll start with the first part, I guess, Caroline.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. So you say in your book that the arts are the foundation for life. Can you expand on what you mean that means to you? And what are the experiences in your own life that helped you arrive at that idea?
Yes, I had wonderful experiences in my own life in that particular area. Both my parents, they came from a farming background, but somehow they had a real interest in the arts, and my mother learned to play the violin and the piano herself, and my father learned to paint pictures, and he often used to listen to classical music when I was very young. So they thought it was important for me to have a comprehensive education in the arts outside the education I got in elementary school. So they started me with art classes. It was the Art Gallery of Toronto at that time. It's now the Art Gallery of Ontario. I had piano lessons for many years. Not that I was very good at the piano, but I had lots of lessons on the piano. I also had my mother read to my brother and myself, Murray, who's a composer, and she used to read from Adventures in Bookland, and there were stories from all different parts of the world, so I got a great interest in culture very early in life. But the most important experience I had when I was very young was when my mother got me into the choir at Grace Church in the Hill in Toronto. I sang in the choir for 6 or 7 years as a boy soprano, and we sang a lot of very beautiful hymns, anthems, and religious music by J.S. Bach or Handel or Schubert and other composers. So by the time I was ready to go to high school, I already had a very comprehensive education in the arts, and I didn't know it at the time, but as life progressed over the years, I looked back more and more and realized that I had an excellent foundation for life in the arts that was going to carry me forward throughout my life.
Very interesting. All right, so you've enjoyed the arts in your life, and you claim in the book that the arts are the key to a fulfilling life. So how can this be achieved?
Well, I found as I got more and more involved in the arts later in life that every art form had some particular feature or factor that made it unique. For example, it was sound and melodies and composition, and you listen to the music of the melody makers in the world like Chopin or Rachmaninoff or Liszt or the Beatles. you very quickly see that, beautiful music comes from melodies and making wonderful sounds. If we're talking about theater, say, or drama, opera, film, cinematographic arts, the key feature, I suppose, is really storytelling, and what wonderful stories they tell about Gandhi or about Dr. Zhivago or any of those great films that have been made. If we're talking about painting, for example, it's largely color and representation, as seen in paintings by Van Gogh and Monet, and those beautiful water lilies that he painted so often in his garden. If it's poetry, the feature that's really most prominent, although all arts idioms aspire to this, is simplicity. I mean, the basic objective in poetry, as we know, is to say things that are profound in the least possible number of words. So when Blake says something like Robin Redbreast in a cage puts all heaven in a rage, he's communicated an enormous amount in 8 simple words or so. And now those words are having an effect on people in terms of, trying to deal more readily with animals in zoos and in cages, treat them more fairly, and as much as possible, get them outside the cages and outside the zoos so they can live another kind of life. If you talk about architecture, for example, some people say architecture is just frozen music. And when I first heard that, I thought, isn't that incredible? I heard it when I was traveling in Europe, and I happened to be traveling in France and England, and I was looking at these Gothic cathedrals in France and England. And yes, they are frozen music. They really look so beautiful, and they're so ornate and intricate that it is like music. So those are the things, I think, as you sort of progress in terms of arts having a fulfilling role in your life. Those are the things that help you to realize that and build on the foundations that might be created earlier.
Interesting. So you talked about the foundations, but why do you think the arts are important at each and every stage of life?
Well, I think they have something to give at each and every stage in life, but it differs very much. I suppose when you're younger, the arts are more interesting for you in terms of, providing with your energy and enthusiasm and creativity. As you get older, the arts bring other forces to bear. They maybe have a different kind of effect on your mood or your morale or some of the problems that you're experiencing in life, whether they're physical or psychological or mental or spiritual. I mean, I've found throughout my life, all these different factors prevail. And very often when I've been in a different mood or my morale is down, I have to remind myself, Paul, you aren't listening to enough music. And as soon as I start listening to music, I mean, we all enjoy different pieces of music, whether it's classical, popular, folk music, music from the different cultures in the world. Music can really lift your spirits and lift your spirits very quickly. And then when you get into the older years, maybe retirement and senior years or in retirement homes, the arts have a tremendous role to play, as science is proving now in virtually every area of the arts, in helping people with health problems and difficulties that they're experiencing with different illnesses and diseases. People that are experiencing Alzheimer's, for example, are finding that listening to music, watching some theaters and films bring back old memories that they can share with families that maybe families didn't know about. People with Parkinson's are now finding through programs like the National Ballet of Canada provides in dance, that's very helpful in dealing with Parkinson's disease because it helps them to gain greater control over their limbs and learn how to walk more effectively, even though they're fighting a very difficult and dangerous disease. So and of course we're experiencing now through COVID-19 that all of the arts are playing a very major role. You know, we look to science to provide the cure for the disease, but we look to the arts to find the means of coping with the disease. And if you're really integrated into the world of the arts in all these different forms and idioms, I think you'll find that dealing with COVID is much easier than it might be if you don't have those activities to engage in.
Wow. Well, you touched on my next question in your answer, but what role do you see the arts playing during the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I think there's a great opportunity here if people are prepared to take advantage of it. And of course, it depends on whether you're working at home or you've lost a job and you have a lot of time on your hands, or you're a senior and you're looking for things. You know, thanks to digital technology and the internet, it's just unbelievable what we can now access in terms of the arts, the best arts, the masterpieces in the arts from every part of the world and every culture can now be discovered on the internet or on the computer or through digital technologies. And this is a tremendous opportunity for people if they want to take advantage of it. But at the same time, when they're looking for things to do, it might be interesting for them to think about, well, maybe I should try writing some poetry. Maybe I should learn to play a musical instrument. You can now take classes online, and a lot of children are doing that, but adults could do that as well. You might want to write an article or a memoir of yourself that you could share with your family later in life. It's just almost, you might want to take photographs and pictures. I mean, we go around now with cameras and we take lots of shots, but there's no reason why you can't do that in a more professional way, going out into your garden or into your natural environment and taking more photographs and developing photographic techniques more seriously. So all these things are available to people if they want to access the vehicles that are now available to make those things happen. And I think that could do a great deal to ease the burden of having to deal with the second wave of COVID-19.
Excellent. Thank you for your insight on that. We're now going to segue into part 2 of the book.
Okay.
So I'm going to start this off by asking, what role can the arts play as a gateway to the cultural age?
This is a very interesting question that you're raising here because cultures are very complex entities, and you can't touch them, you can't see them. People argue that you can feel them, and I think you can feel certain elements in the arts that do give you a greater impression of your culture. But generally speaking, it's very difficult to access culture and cultures, and the arts are one of the best vehicles for this. And they do this because the arts can be symbolic in so many important ways. I was thinking the other day, I was hearing the piece Finlandia, written by Jan Sibelius, who's a favorite composer of mine. Well, a lot of people that are in Finland believe that Finlandia should be the national anthem, that it should be the major statement about their culture in the same way that our national anthem is a major statement about our culture. They've had a very difficult time in the development in Finland because of their location in that area of the world and conflicts that they've had with some of their neighbors. And somehow Sibelius was just able to capture that and communicate it to other people in Finland through his beautiful music in Sibelius. Or you could take the Group of Seven here in Canada. Group of Seven performed the same function in Canada as works like Finlandia have done in Finland. And the Group of Seven and the Indigenous peoples in Canada, they made us aware of how essential it is for us as Canadians to understand and appreciate and respect our relationship with the land. And that was basically, I think, one of the major missions of the Group of Seven, to take us out of our offices and our homes, get us out in the natural environment. There's no better time to do that now than now, with the beauty of the fall and all the changing cultures and colors, and really have a good look at the land and understand how important it is for us to be connected in the land and be so appreciative of it. If you really want to think this idea of art and art, pieces of art and works of art as symbolic, then you might, and you want to understand how that's possible comprehensively and in detail to understand another culture, you might want to look at American culture and the work that's being done by the incredible documentary filmmaker Ken Burns. 30 or 40 years ago, Ken Burns embarked on trying to bring Americans closer to their culture and understanding their culture through documentaries that he made. And he was very clever in picking subjects that would depict this. And what did he depict? He picked the Civil War, very important element in war in American history. He picked baseball, such a popular national sport in the United States. He picked the building of the Brooklyn Bridge, which was quite an incredible construction at the time. He had a program on the Roosevelts. He had a program on jazz, on popular music. He was always taking just the things that really made American culture tick. And one of the most important ones he made, of course, was on the national parks, which he called America's best idea. Yosemite, Yellowstone, and all those other beautiful parks. And when you start to watch all those documentary films that he made, a really very strong image comes into your mind about American culture. And I must say it's an image that's very different than the culture that we're being exposed today that's going on in the United States. So it's well worth looking into what Ken Burns has done to make us appreciate American culture and how rich it is.
Very interesting. So why do you feel it's so essential to enter cultural age?
Well, I'm a great believer that cultural scholars have had a great deal to say over the years and generations and centuries that have been virtually ignored, but are packed full with wisdom, understanding, knowledge, awareness, consciousness. And one of the cultural scholars I've been most attracted to in my life is a scholar named Johan Huizinga. He was from the Netherlands, and he wrote quite a bit on cultures and different cultures in the world and culture. And he said this in one of his comments in one of his books: activities like economics, industry, agriculture, technology, commercialism, financialism have to be balanced very strongly by aesthetic, humanistic, intellectual, spiritual, ethical, moral values and activities. And that to me is the underpinning or the centerpiece for what a cultural age should be like. The real achievement, I believe, that's necessary in a cultural age, if I just put it very simply, is to achieve a much better balance in Canada, the States, Europe, all other parts of the world, between the material and the non-material dimensions of development. We've done very well with the material dimensions of the development over the last 2 centuries by focusing on some of the former factors I mentioned. We've built up incredible standards of living and qualities of life for billions of people in the world. Not everyone, much more needs to be done, but the standards of living have been raised astronomically. On the other side, we haven't achieved those same developments. And that's what's missing in the world today. And interestingly, I think one of the things that's bringing us to an awareness of that is the COVID-19 pandemic. It's not all negative. There are messages there that we have to learn. And what have we seen during the COVID pandemic? We've seen a lot more humanism, honesty, compassion, sensitivity, concern for people that are on the front lines in hospitals and healthcare centers, saying hello to people in the morning. We're no longer busy, so busy we can't say hello in the morning, or stop for a few minutes, talk to people across the street, inquire into how they're doing, show that sense of humanity that doesn't come out of economics, it doesn't come out of technology, it comes out of the arts and it comes out of humanism and the humanities. So that's why Huizinga was so insightful when he said we got to find that delicate, precious balance between these 2 different areas of life. And to me, that's why it's so important to enter a cultural age. That's what a cultural age is designed to accomplish, to find the harmony and the balance between those 2 different sets of forces, material and non-material.
Wow. So how can a cultural age be realized?
Well, I think probably in the same way, in starting out at any rate, in the same way that the environmental people started the environmental movement, and some environmentalists now, as you know, are arguing that we have to move into an environmental age or an ecological age because of the importance of coming to grips with climate change and global warming and resource depletion and the breakdown of fragile ecosystems and so on. So the problem is, if we want to enter a cultural age, we have to create a cultural movement. And in my mind, that movement should come from people in all areas of the arts, all of the various arts idioms that we talked about earlier, anthropologists who've talked a lot about culture and cultures in their writings. Sociologists have done the same. There's a big discipline now called cultural studies, where they're studying all sorts of cultural issues. All these people that are involved in culture and cultures in different ways will have to come together and make a collective case for the centrality of the arts, culture, and cultures in general, and cultural development and policy going forward into the future. Next to that, I think governments have the most important role, because governments have to have the holistic perspective to see and understand what's going on in the world and ensure that in our future development, that unique balance and harmony that I talked about earlier is being created. That we don't just go back to an earlier period of history, but we go forward into a cultural period of history when we achieve that balance. And of course, the most important thing of all is the general public, because the general public has to make the changes in their own lives and lifestyles and ways of life to move forward into that kind of cultural age where, we can be less demanding on the environment and our environmental resources, and more demanding on developing assets and capabilities and interests within ourselves that give us the fulfillment and happiness in life that we maybe had at one time from material possessions.
Wow, that is some really interesting stuff. So let's bring this back to our community. Markham is rich in arts and culture. So how does this strengthen the community, and what impact will this have for Markham's future?
Well, I think at the heart of, I've lived in Markham as a resident and author here for almost 40 years, and I believe that the greatest asset in Markham is its cultural diversity. And it's a reflection, I think I was talking about the way in which the arts can epitomize something that's much larger. So I think our cultural diversity in terms of our demographic composition epitomizes to a very great extent the multiculturalism and multicultural policy of the government of Canada. We've had many demographic changes in Markham over the last half century, and these changes have brought into Markham people from many different cultures of the world. So there's a very rich resource that has to be and should be capitalized on. We have to learn more about the cultures of other groups and people and ethnic groups. And it's not just to respect them or understand them. This is necessary and important to do that, and we can do that through sharing cultural experiences. But there's another aspect to this that's terribly important, as I've found out over the course of my life, traveling and studying cultures in the world, and that is there are opportunities to learn from other cultures. We don't know it all in any culture. Every culture has its assets and its liabilities. Every culture has different ways of doing things. Sometimes we encounter problems in life that may not be able to be solved through our own culture, but might be able to be solved through experience and learning about some other culture in the world. I learned a lot, for example, from French culture about joie de vivre and how essential it is. I mean, the French like materialism a great deal, as we all do, but the French don't sacrifice their concern for joie de vivre for materialism. They want good food, they want good concerts, they want good theatrical performances, they want good literature, they want good language, people using language effectively. So there's much to be learned from other cultures. It's very rich. And within the context of all the organizations that exist in Markham at the present time, both arts organizations and ethnic organizations, we have to do a lot of hard work on that in the future, I think, both to share and to learn about our various cultures.
Excellent. And kind of building on that, how can Markham invest in the arts to propel us further into a cultural age?
Well, I think this has a lot to do with what I would call management or administration of the arts and culture in a city or a community. And this is an area that's terribly important and terribly difficult. When I was at the Ontario Arts Council back in the 60s, we found that there was a conflict between the staff and the board over two aspects in this area. And I go back to the original creation of the first arts council in the world, the Arts Council of Great Britain, which was started during the Second World War to help people in Britain cope with the war, and very effectively did it. They used to talk later on in their annual reports about few but roses. And what they meant by that was that it's necessary in Great Britain to develop a few very professional, highly professional, very high quality arts organizations. And their approach to cultural and arts administration was to say, you create the beautiful roses, and those beautiful roses pull everything else up by the bootstraps. They help semi-professional organizations become professional. They help amateur organizations become semi-professional. And that's one approach. And when I was at the Arts Council, there was always a conflict in that approach because the people on the board tended to side with the Roses approach, like, let's just put all our money into the professional organizations, the ballet and the symphony and the opera and so on, and they'll bring everybody else up eventually. And the staff of the organization felt, well, they weren't bringing everybody else up. And it was much more important to give more support to individual artists, start grants for artists and arts organizations, help organizations develop in their administration and in their artistic affairs. Obviously, the answer to this is to do both. We have to do both, especially in a city like Markham that's on the move now and wants to go forward into the future. We have to develop our big organizations in Markham, like the Varley Art Gallery, the libraries, the Markham Museum, the Flato Markham Theater. I could go on and on about these, the Kindred Spirits Orchestra. These organizations now have arrived at the point, and many of them are performing organizations or exhibiting, and they're now saddled with a whole lot of problems having to deal with distancing. So the government in Markham has to be helpful to them in terms of developing the new technologies that enable them to carry their activities forward in new ways. And the other half of that, which is so essential, is to provide the support and encouragement and funding for the artists and the smaller arts organizations that are coming along, because most of them have capabilities, and those capabilities have to be nurtured and delivered. And I think if you develop that kind of comprehensive approach through in arts management and administration, and a good deal of this, as we know, has to come through the Markham Arts Council in one form or another, then that's the best way to go forward, I think, for Markham in the future. Make the arts and culture central to our lives, and use organizations like the Markham Arts Council, the larger organizations, the smaller ones, and the artists to carry us forward into that new era in cultural Markham.
Wow. Well, thank you, Paul, for such great insight and perspective into culture and its importance. If you would like to learn more, you can purchase Paul's book at rockmillspress.com. And we've also included some links in our video description below to learn more about Paul and his full collection of work. So thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And I should just say in conclusion, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to people at the council and in Markham about this particular issue of our development. And I should mention that you can also buy the book from Amazon CA. It's listed there too, as well as Rocks Mills Press. So thank you very much, and look forward to moving forward together. Thank you.
Thank you.